Hello YouTube, I am Lightly Salted, welcome to the channel, and welcome to part 3 of our tutorial on the excellent PC subsim game, U-Boat. Quick disclaimer before we get into this, Salted made a little bit of an oopsie in the last video. There was a little bit of an issue with my save file, so if you'll recall, we were going to be patrolling out to Sector BE, and yeah, we're not heading there this time because we got a randomized new mission set list. So I've set the U-Boat up to the same rough parameters as we had set it before, that instead of patrolling Sector BE, heading out a full tile farther to Sector BD, here in the mid-Atlantic. We might end up with a few more ships in the lanes, so maybe that'll help us out a little bit later on. Since we're underway and leaving Port La Rochelle, I thought I'd quickly touch upon the fuel consumption, which we had touched upon in an earlier video. You can see here that while I have my chief engineer, Mr. Oldorp, he is currently working the diesel engines, as shown by the icon in the lower right of his little badge picture thingy. So if we head up here to the top of the screen and look at our fuel consumption, we are currently at 100% fuel capacity since we just filled up the boat. However, our diesels are costing us 12.5 liters per kilometer, or 5 liters per minute. So like I said in the first go around, if we added some helpers to Mr. Oldorp, let's give him one to start. Just before I throw his helper on there, let's take a look at our telegraph here. You can see that we only have the ability to go up to speed 4. Now, as I add a helper to Mr. Oldorp, either by using this menu or lighting up the little green bar, you can see that we've now unlocked 5th gear. We've unlocked flank speed. Very important to bear in mind that your speed is very much dependent on the crew working the engine. So now that he has his helper and we have unlocked that 5th gear, why don't we go ahead and take a look at our fuel consumption. Okay, and we are now using a multiplier of 10% less fuel due to having an additional sailor on the engine. So we are now burning 11.2 liters per kilometer. We go ahead and give Mr. Oldorp an additional helper. And if we check our fuel consumption, we are now using 8.7 liters per kilometer. So that is definitely going to work in our favor in the long run, since we have a fairly significant amount of distance to traverse here in the Atlantic. Another quick tip, if I take Mr. Hagnow here, our chief bosun, I can have him begin navigating. Now, navigation is one of the most important and understated features in this game. You'll see here on the map screen, just below menu, it'll give you some information about what's currently going on with your ship. We have spent 0 hours at sea, wind is currently at 5 knots. And you'll notice a little exclamation point icon is the next in our list, and it says 100%. This here is our navigation correctness. Now, navigation correctness will expire over time. As we get out of the port, we will start having to navigate on our own. This is not something you're going to have to manually perform. Just setting an appropriate navigation officer on the station will be enough to keep this bar up. Now, the navigator, in conjunction with our gyro compass, which gives us a decrease in chance of getting lost of 60%, they will actually prevent us from losing our way at sea. Back here in the map view, we take a look at this 100%, and if we were farther out, you'd see it slowly begin to decrease. Now, if that gets down to 0, we will be lost. And what you'll end up with is something that looks like this as a screen. You will have no idea where your boat is or what direction you're heading in. So at that moment, if you have allowed yourself to become lost, you're going to have to take one of your officers and throw them on the navigation table immediately with as many helpers as they're willing to accept. This process is going to take some time. You're going to be spending an awful lot of time in ×5 time compression in order to have them ascertain your locations in the ocean. So we'll take Mr. Hagnow and we'll have him start working the navigator station. With Mr. Hagnow now in place, we will give him 1 helper. Now let's take a look at our fuel consumption. You'll see here that adding sailors to navigation has also given us a multiplier of -10%. So now we are only burning 7.9 liters per kilometer of diesel. If I go ahead and give him one more helper, we will see that our multipliers between engines and navigation total up to 50% in our favor. We're now only burning 7 liters per kilometer. Now this is at speed 3. You'll see if I throw us into speed 4, our consumption will increase. It's still going to stay fairly low. This little tip will help us greatly while we're motoring on out to the hunting grounds. In our previous episodes, I had been showing you a more hands-on approach to taking your officers and selecting which stations you would like to have them work. Alternatively, by holding down the tab key, we'll bring up this menu. This will give us access to all of our officers currently on board. It will make selecting them a lot easier, and we have the additional option of quick selecting a task for them to perform. Very important to note that not all tasks that the officers can perform will be located in this list. There are certain items on the boat which you can only interact with in a more hands-on fashion. For instance, the electric and diesel compressors can only be utilized by selecting an officer and have them interact with it directly. So again, holding the tab key, excellent in a pinch. Alright, as you can see here, we've made some progress in our journey out to the hunting grounds. So I'm going to give you a quick idea of how I run the crew on the ship. We can see here that our chief engineer and our watch officer are both fairly fatigued. We're going to go ahead and give them a rest. We're going to hold the tab key, hover over their icons, and send them off to bed. Now, by keeping your eye on the telegraph in the top right, you'll notice that when I take Mr. Oldope away from the engines, we are going to lose speed. And there you have it. We've dropped down to 3rd gear max. Without an engineer on the engines, speed 3 is your maximum. We're going to go ahead and remove their helpers, since I doubt they need anybody to hold their hands to go to sleep. And Mr. Watcher, our mechanic, will be acting as a backup to continue preserving fuel for us. Our captain is slightly fatigued. However, I think we're going to give him a cup of coffee so he can keep a sharp lookout for us. Right-click on the cabinet, and right-click to drink some coffee. Fantastic. An important tip, while you're heading out to your patrol sector, you want to have your radioman tune in for a couple of hours each day to ensure you're not missing any transmissions from HQ. You could get lucky and end up with a mission. I'm going to go ahead and throw some time compression in here, and I'll be sure to check in with you if anything interesting comes up. We've managed to pass the night without incident, and by switching to map view, we can see that we are down to 74% worth of our navigation. We're going to have Mr. Klaus Hagnow continue with his duties on the navigation table. We're going to give Mr. Watcher a break, and have Mr. Oldorp work the engines again with his helpers to preserve that sweet, sweet diesel. And we'll also have Mr. Osterman tune in on the radio. We'll have our captain up above, watching out for ships, or smoke on the horizon, or aircraft, or fish. I'll keep an eye out and be back with you as soon as something comes up. And as you can see here, our radio officer has picked up a transmission from HQ. We're going to go ahead and have him decode it for us. Now this bar will fill fairly slowly, however if we give him a helper, we will gain a little bit of speed on it. Transmission coming in. And by clicking on the envelope here on the right, we can bring up our patrol. One of our ships has gone missing. Its last known coordinates are 46 degrees north by 29 degrees west. That sounds terrible. Where is that at? It turns out that our missing U-boat is well within our patrol sector. So we're going to go ahead and mouse over its icon and right-click to set an interception course. We'll go ahead and increase to flank speed and carry on. We've just crossed the line into our patrol sector. We've got an icon show up that tells us we are missing a radio operator and we should be contacting HQ to let them know we've reached the patrol sector. Mr. Osterman, hop on the radio for me, please. Now this here is a bit of a bug. It says it was out of range for a moment. It shows up occasionally. Be patient and you'll be able to radio back home, provided you're not in the middle of a fog bank or a storm. Patrol sector reach, And we're going to get 500 budgets for sending that information back home. Fantastic. 500 more budgets. We still have about 350 kilometers worth of distance to make up to find our missing U-boat. So I'll see you in a moment. Chimney smoke spotted on the horizon. Mr. Osterman, radio that home, please. Let's take a look at our map. And we have chimney smoke dead ahead. Reduce speed. Change direction. This target is slowly moving away from us, and we're going to try to run alongside the target. Our proximity to the target is approximately 13 kilometers. We're going to go ahead and increase speed. Speed 5, I think. And I think we're going to dive. Let's go ahead and pause this for a moment. Now, like we talked about in earlier videos, I could use the icons to the right of our depth meter, but a quick disclaimer about using the depth meter, either on the meter itself or the icons to its right, the game seems to randomly select an officer to operate the valves for you. Your sub will not begin to submerge until the ballast tanks are flooded. What I personally like to do is take the closest officer to the valves, in this case being Mr. Hagnow, and we're going to have him flood the tanks. Go ahead and unpause time. And you can see that the captain has given the order for periscope depth. You'll notice that my oxygen consumption immediately begins dropping. That's because they're going to be closing up hatches. So we're also going to have Mr. Hagnow throw on the blue lighting for us. Now you'll see... And automatically the game will switch to electric engines. We will not have to make the selection ourselves. It still shows us that diesel is selected, but we are indeed in electric. We're also going to go ahead and have our mechanic operate the diving planes for us. This will prevent us from breaching the surface, as we have no idea what kind of contact this is. This may be a warship. Ordinarily, you'd only have to worry about using the dive planes in much rougher seas. However, we are moving at a fair clip, so we do have the possibility of broaching through the waves. We're going to go ahead and have our radio officer move over to the hydrophone. We are now entering the area in which the target is confined. This will affect our time compression much like being close to shore will. Now you can see our hydrophone range is only slightly more than the captain's visual range on the attack periscope. That is because of our speed. We are currently making 98 decibels worth of noise. If we were to lower our speed, say down to forward 3, you will see our decibel levels begin to drop. As our decibel levels drop, the range of the hydrophones increase. You'll also notice our consumption of electrics. We have a negative 15% modifier from having additional sailors on the engines, and a negative 20% modifier by having crew on navigation. This will help us conserve battery power. Detection. We have found a freighter, and our alarms begin. Our discipline is now not only going to drop because of our depth, but it's also going to drop because the ship is currently at alarmed status. Our hydrophone operator is going to be automatically beginning to calculate information about this freighter. If we select the target here, we can see that we have 1% worth of our torpedo solution calculated. So we're going to throw a pause in here and talk a little bit about gaining torpedo solutions. Officers who have either sight or sound on your targets will begin gathering information. That includes your sonar operator and any of your officers that may be operating periscopes. So to add to this, we could have Mr. Hagnow move to the observation scope, ensure we bring it up, and once we get within visual range, he will begin adding his calculations. Mr. Watcher, will have you come off the dive steers, please, and begin warming up torpedoes. Again, without your torpedoes pre-warmed, you have a higher chance of it dudding out before reaching target. Now, if you don't prefer to have your crew do your calculations for you, you could use the game in hardcore aiming mode, or you can choose to do manual calculations on your map screen. If we scroll on in here, we can see our target ship. We can go ahead and place a marker on her, pick a point of the bow, say, and give it some time to move away from that point. It'll come in handy in a moment. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and throw a pause in here, and let's talk about getting information about our targets. You'll see here on the left-hand side, we have our identification book. Let's go ahead and bring that up. And we're going to try to match the visual representation of the ship we can see to its silhouette. Now this looks to me to be an Empire-class freighter. As we can see here, we have the Empire Belle, Empire Tower, and Empire Explorer, all with a fairly common shape, but some differences. So by taking a look at our target here, I would say she is not an Empire Belle. She does have the two masts with booms, as shown here and here. However, these pillars don't seem to be shown. Let's move on. Empire Tower, the booms with cranes. However, this ship has a transmission antenna dead center of the ship, which our target does not. Empire Explorer, 1, 2 masts, 1, 2 masts, and excellent, we have these spars shown on the rear. So I'm fairly confident that this is an Empire Explorer. Now, by locking in this target, it will affect all further calculations, such as distance. As you can see here, it gives a mast height of 34.75 meters. And that will be very, very important when using our statometer tool to determine the ship's distance. So let's go ahead and lock in our Empire Explorer. And as you can see here in the bottom left, we have 25% worth of our solution on this target. One of the easier calculations you can make is speed. Open up our chronometer tool, and it does give you instructions just here. Essentially, what you want to do is start chronometer with this button as the bow of the ship passes through the center post of your target site. When the absolute aft of the ship passes by it as well, you will stop the chronometer and lock in your results. This will give you a fairly accurate speed of your target. So let's go ahead and unpause time and begin the process. Very important to note, do not move your periscope while you are taking your timings. And begin. And stop. Set. Okay. According to our chronometer tool, the ship is doing 5 knots. Angle of bow. We have our course tool. And the idea of the course tool is simply match the visual representation of the ship inside the compass to what you can see. Conversely, you remember that point we put on the map? We can get the ship's course by pausing time and placing another point, just here on the bow as before. We'll scroll out slightly, and we see here the longitude and latitude lines of our map. These will be perfectly aligned north-south, east-west on our map, which will give us a perfect reference as to our target's course. So we'll go ahead and choose a north-south line that is in the direction of travel of our target. We're going to use our ruler, place a point here, and a point here where the line terminates. Continuing to use the ruler tool, we will select the first point we placed on the bow of the ship and draw a line through the second point through our north-south line. Roughly so. We'll grab our protractor tool, select the top point of our north-south line, and place a point where the two lines intersect. You can scroll in real tight. Realistically, you're always going to be off by a pixel or two, but close is going to count. So we'll go ahead and select here, and continue to take that line to the end of our ship's path. Now this shows us a bearing of 103 degrees. Very important to note, the ship is actually traveling west. The top of our north-south line can be considered point 0, 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and so on. But if we were to move counterclockwise from our north-south, this point would be 360 degrees. Ergo, as the ship is traveling west, this is actually a negative number. So 360 degrees minus 103 gives us a bearing of 257 degrees. We'll go ahead and unpause time, select Mr. Graph, and we'll enter in right here our course of 257 degrees. Hit enter. Perfect. Now the ship is still fairly ahead of us. We could take a distance bearing on it just now and fire away. However, the closer you are to a 90-degree angle of your target, the wider the target. So what we're going to do is accelerate time until we've pulled roughly abreast. We'll go ahead and match course, and I'll see you in a moment. And as you can see here, we've pulled just in front of our target. So we're going to go ahead and slow down. And this looks like a very likely position to take our shot from. We'll go ahead and select our skipper. And we're going to get the missing part of our calculation, which is our distance. Now, our shipmates have automatically calculated its distance to be 2 kilometers. There are several ways that we can find it on our own. Go ahead and bring up our periscope. And we'll go ahead and pause time. Now, my preferred method is to use the statometer tool. If you place the left to right portion of your targeting sight directly at the water line, this will give us a more accurate reading. Let's go ahead and open up our statometer tool. By using the Q and E keys, we will make a ghost image of the ship in question. So if we use E, we can bring its ghost image up. We talked about when we locked in the type of ship about the height of the mast. This is where it becomes important. If we have the highest mast of the ship touching the water line of our ghost image, this will give us an accurate representation of the ship's distance. That looks pretty good right about there. Let's go ahead and lock that in. How else could we get distance? Well, we could use our compass, head on down to where our ship is located, go ahead and make a point, and draw out to the approximate distance of our target. 3 here. Go ahead and place a point. Our crewmate's estimation of its distance was 2 kilometers, and our calculated distance was 3 kilometers. This looks to me to be about 2,800 meters. So why don't we go ahead and try to enter that in? Now it's important to note, this distance, while measured in kilometers, you have to enter the distance in meters. If we were to say 3, well, the game doesn't like that very much because it thinks that the target is 3 meters away from our boat, and that simply won't do. So let's go ahead and throw in the 2,800 that we believe the ship to be at. Now when I hit enter, this will not say 2,800, but I assure you, the number you plug in is what the game will calculate. And there we have it. The game believes we mean 2 kilometers. We have our calculation complete. Let's go ahead and open up our torpedo screen. Let's go ahead and flood tubes 1 and 2.
Rohr 1, bewässern. Rohr 2, bewässern.
Tube 1 flooded. Tube 2 flooded. Now, as you can see here on the bottom, you have some more control over your torpedoes. Here in your speed, you have the ability to change it from its advertised 30 knots to a lower or higher speed. That's because this is a T1 steam-propelled torpedo. The T2 torpedoes come with a built-in speed of 24 knots, which will increase to 30 during its run. I think I'll leave it at 30 knots. The depth. We have the ability to set the depth lower in hopes to punch a hole in the hull even further down below the waterline. Currently in this build, 126, this is bugged out. By changing the depth by even half a meter, you run the very real risk of your torpedoes skimming underneath the ship and missing entirely. Your dispersion rate is the distance between your first torpedo and second torpedo hitting the target. I think we'll leave it at 40 for now. Target is moving 5 knots at a bearing of 257 degrees, approximate bearing of 2 kilometers. Fire.
Los!
Go ahead and throw a pause in here. Very important to note, if you had multiple targets to choose from, you must close this torpedo screen using the X before you can select a new target. Otherwise, the game has the possibility of firing all future torpedoes directly at that same target. Close our screen, we'll unpause time and go into our map mode. As you can see here, our torpedoes are trucking towards the target. If we were to select one of them, we can actually enter its viewing mode. And we are now our torpedo. Oh, you little devil, you. We'll go ahead and leave that view. Back to our ship. We also have the opportunity to select our target, bring up its viewing mode, and we can watch the torpedo slam home in almost first-person mode. Sorry about this, Empire lad. We can also zoom directly down on the map and watch the track of our torpedoes as they go. We could open up the manual mode on our periscope and watch the torpedoes impact from here. Also a quick tip, by hitting the U key on your keyboard, you can actually remove the user face icons altogether to give yourselves those sweet, sweet visuals. And U key again to bring them back. Fantastic. The torpedo is halfway to its target. We're going to go ahead and get into the ship's viewing mode to watch them slam home. Now we know they're coming in from its left side, so we'll scroll out and try to get a pretty shot of this. And right about there looks great. I'm going to wait for the torpedoes to get closer to the target while you kick back and relax, and I'll see you in a moment. 10 seconds to impact. And boom. Gotcha. Struck the target amidships. Excellent place for that. She's on fire. And it turns out one of our torpedoes was off target. It missed just aft of the ship. By selecting the ship, we can bring up its health bar, and we can see that she's taken some pretty significant damage. And they've abandoned her. These little icons here show us that the ship has been visually detected by sonar, that she is alarmed, she is ablaze, and she has been evacuated. There is no one to fight the fire. This ship is going down. Let's go ahead and watch it sink. Sorry. Let's have our radioman jump back on the radio and send the information back to headquarters that we have indeed sunk an enemy transport. Let's have Mr. Hagnow hide his periscope. Get on navigation as we're down to 65%. With some help. We'll have the skipper hide his periscope and leave it. And we will surface the boat. The captain has given the order to switch back to diesel engines. We have an icon that lets us know that we have a low air reserve. What they're talking about is just here on the right of your screen. This is our compressed air forcing water out of the ballast tanks. And unless we manually recharge that compressed air, we will now be only operating at 61% of our maximum. Which means we could dive again and surface again. However, each time you surface, you're going to be using more and more of your compressed air reserves. So what I plan to do is have Mr. Oldorp, since he is working the engines in the rear of the ship, we're going to have him turn on the diesel compressor for us. Mr. Hagnow, if you could switch the lighting back to white for now, please. Skipper, let's get you on the conning tower, keeping a lookout. And let's get our radioman down for a nap. Mr. Watcher is busy reloading torpedoes for us. Let's go ahead and give him some help. And carry on with our primary mission of locating our missing U-boat. Well, everyone, I'll be ending the episode here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope my small and not quite 100% accurate tutorial of calculating manual solutions was helpful for you. In the next episode, we're going to be coming across our missing brethren and seeing what we can do about the situation. Anything I didn't touch on that you'd like to see more of, go ahead and leave a comment down in the description below. Consider hitting that like button and subscribe if you haven't already to carry on with our U-boat series. I've been Lightly Salted. Thanks for tuning in. Bye now.